Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm looking at a very unusual and interesting train. I'm being quite careful not to call it a locomotive because it's really not one of those, but it's made by Heljan. Today's model then is this. It's exclusive to Rails of Sheffield and it is the NER Electric Autocar. Now this model did come out some time ago and I do apologise for not reviewing this sooner, but it is made by Heljan, and as I've mentioned in the past I believe, I'm not keen on buying Heljan models when they're new and at their full price, because past experience has taught me that very often they're just not worth it. Now I'm not saying that I don't think this model's going to be worth it, because I've actually not experienced this at all at this point. I'm just saying that past experience has made me quite reluctant to pay lots of money for Heljan models. So this one from Rails has a full price of £199.95, which is pretty up there I think for something like this. But Rails did eventually reduce this. I managed to get this 20% off for £159.95, which to me sounded a lot better. Now, as you can probably tell by looking at this, this is a very early and obscure prototype, so it's not a Class 37 that they're going to be selling thousands of. So yeah, as a slightly more obscure item, I can understand why this would be much more expensive than, let's say, an Accurascale Deltic or something like that. And for that reason, I'm not going too crazy about the fact that this is £200. However, with prices like that, I am expecting this to kind of match the likes of Accurascale and Bachmann in terms of quality, detail and features. And I'm actually quite excited about this one because I've really not learned too much about this model before today, so it will be quite fresh for me. Anyway, if you're interested in giving one of these a try, I do have affiliate links in the description. But for now, let's see if this is worth the money. Let's see if it's any good at all. And fingers crossed, this will be one that I will enjoy. Okay, let's take a look. So the first thing I've noticed is that the box is suspiciously light. And I do like heavier models, but this is a single car unit that at most would have coupled up to a single coach. So actually, it doesn't need to be that heavy. Also then, if they haven't spent loads of money on making this really heavy, hopefully that means that there was plenty of budget left over for other features. And one thing I am aware of with this model is that it's got a pretty fancy interior, so I am looking forward to seeing that. Anyway, let me show you the end of the box. So the version I've got is 31700. It is in the NER red and cream livery. It's the Electric Autocar number 3170, and this is the Rails Limited exclusive. We've also got a few specs on the end of the box here. It's DCC ready with an X18 pin DCC socket. It does have working lights, we'll see that later on. NEM couplings, so that's good, so you can actually couple this up to that coach if you want to do that, and it is Era 2. And 3170 is the preserved example, although this says Era 2, so this is obviously that, but back in Era 2. Okay, well, there's not much else to see on the rest of the box, so let's open this up and let's see what this is like. I've really been curious about this one, and when it came out, a lot of people were asking me to review it, so hopefully this will be interesting. In fact, I know it will be. Okay, booklet here. On the back, we've got the lovely image of the end of the thing. Northeastern Railway 1903 Electric Autocar. More on the prototype a little bit later. And then on the front, we've got a little bit of info about this. So it says the minimum curve radius is R2, which is fairly standard. And it's also got a slimline coreless motor powering both the axles of the motor bogie. So that's pretty interesting. Hopefully then we've got an uncompromised interior this time. Optional details, okay, have we got any diagrams for the optional detail parts? No, not really. Removing the body, apparently it's just clipped on, okay, not screwed on, okay, that is what it is. Conversion to DCC, apparently once the body's off, there's an X18 decoder socket up on top of the lighting bar. DCC sound, it's got ample space inside apparently to install a speaker of your choice. Right, so that means no speaker pre-fitted then. Light function, okay, so apparently this has got working LED interior lights. They can be switched on DCC. Have we got any more information about other lighting? Okay, right. Due to the small size and position, it was not possible to fit scale working headlamps or tail lamps. Okay, well, fair enough, yeah. Better than making them too large and chunky, of course, but again, 200 quid? That's a pity. Alright, bit of an exploded diagram here, well, very exploded, showing some of the parts. Not arranged into their positions though, so it's hard to get a sense of the model, but useful if you need some spares. Here's a photo of the real thing. Yeah, very ornamental this. I'm really looking forward to seeing the livery on this model. And then we've got some of the versions of the model available. So we've got 3170 in the red and cream, 3171 in the red and cream, and then we've got this NER brown version, which is pretty interesting, and that's 3170. So a little bit of choice in terms of which version you can go for. But let's have a look at mine and let's see what this red and cream livery looks like. Here we go. Ooh, yes. Really lovely colours already. In fact, I saw a tram at the Seaton tramway which had a very similar livery to this, which is also what made me want to get one of these to review. But yeah, let's pull this out. Let's see what we get in here besides the rail car itself. Nothing else in the pack, although there are some accessories just here. So let's pull this sleeve out and let's have a look at those. There's also a label here. It says, "Caution, please ensure the model is placed correctly in the plastic tray engine bay this end." Alright, well that's useful. Nice bit of attention to detail there. Okay, accessories then. So, the big pipe here is an exhaust pipe which you can fit to one of the bogies if you want to, but I believe the model won't run with that fitted, so that's just for static display. Then we've got some screw-link couplings, and yeah, weirdly, those are just static as well. I wonder why they didn't use the fully movable ones. So recently new tooled model, so yeah, it's a bit of a shame to see them cut back on that, but not a big deal, and it's not something that I'll be fitting, so it won't affect me too much. But anyway, let's have a look. I can see what looks like some pretty complex detailing on the roof there. So let's reveal it and take a first look at what the finish is like. Yeah, there is some serious detailing on the roof. Wow. Alright, so straight away that suggests that this is going to be a pretty detailed and complex model. I wonder what these are on the roof. They almost look like radiators for dissipating heat. I don't know. Let's say that's my guess. And then we've also got the vents here as well, which appear to be separately fitted, but we'll talk about the detail in a second. Okay, lifting up. Alright. And there it is. Yeah, a beautifully painted machine this is. Really, really impressive actually, and from first glance, this does appear to be a good quality model. Now that it's out of the packaging, I don't think the weight seems too bad, and looking underneath we can see the whole underframe here is die-cast, which is really good. Less good is the amount of oil on the powered bogie here. Blimey. So this is going to need a clean before I put it anywhere near my layout. We've had that before with Heljan, I think. But yeah, apart from that, it does seem to be a great quality model, and I will inspect this fully in just a second and feedback on whether that is actually the case or not. But yeah, from first glance, it does seem to be. Anyway, a little bit of background on the Autocar in real life, and then I'll show you this thing up close and we'll talk about its features and details. The two NER Electric Autocars were built in 1903 to the design of Vincent Raven. They're known as electric autocars, but they're not actually electrics in the traditional sense, i.e. picking up power through an overhead line or a third rail. Instead, they actually had their own power plants on board in the form of a petrol engine which drove a dynamo, a little bit like a diesel electric but with a petrol engine instead. In 1903, this idea was revolutionary, and it was supposedly the world's first use of an internal combustion engine in a passenger-carrying rail vehicle. The power generated on board would supply two 55 horsepower motors which drove the driving wheels. The design was modified and changed over time, with several different engines fitted to the Autocars. In 1923, for instance, a 225 horsepower engine was fitted, far more powerful than the original 85 horsepower one, and this gave the Autocar enough power to haul an additional coach, which, as I've mentioned, they did, effectively making this into an early DMU. Having been in service for many years, one of the two Autocars was withdrawn and scrapped in 1930, while the other one, which is 3170, was also withdrawn, but the body was repurposed as a holiday home, allowing it to enter some form of preservation. Much later, it was restored into working order. Now, of course, the chassis and the workings were not originals, they weren't kept, and so instead it uses a new 225 horsepower diesel engine and a power bogie from a Southern Railway Class 416. But this ingenuity has allowed number 3170 to live on and run again. So, I think it is official. I have found a Heljan loco that I genuinely really like. I have thoroughly enjoyed this model so far. I've been looking over it. I'm blown away by the build quality of this thing. There's lots of aspects of this model that I really enjoy, but it is the build quality for me which is the most surprising. In fact, it's quite hard to believe that this was built by the same company that brought us the 10800 and that Ruston 165DE, both of which were very sloppily built. This is totally different from that. It is still a complex model like those were, but it's been put together absolutely brilliantly. And it's funny because the last Rails of Sheffield exclusive by Heljan that I looked at, I believe that was the ES1, which was the electric Bobo. I thought that was much better quality than usual from Heljan as well. So I don't know what it is about the Rails exclusives and Heljan, but I do think that these are some of Heljan's better quality models. So Heljan, well done with this one. Whatever you did differently with the design and building of this, do it more because it really has worked. Having said that, I'm not entirely convinced that this is quite worth £200. It is a little bit simple for that amount of money. So first of all, it is light. It comes in at 218 grams, and I do have quite a few 060 tank engines which are actually heavier than this. It is, however, heavier than the Bachmann Class 121, which was a single cart DMU, so that's good. And of course, at most, this would only be hauling one coach, and is it going to struggle with that? No, absolutely not. Otherwise, in terms of simplicity, yeah, it is a pity about the non-working lamps. I do understand why they've had to forego that feature, but then again, most models do have working lights on the ends, so it is a pity that this missing feature wasn't reflected in the price. Also, the buffers. These are just painted plastic buffers, and they're not sprung. Now again, can we all live without sprung buffers? Yes, absolutely. But for me personally, at 200 quid, I would want to see them. However, I bought this at a reduced price, of course, of £159.95. And I have to say, I think that is a much fairer price for this. And if Rails were to reduce this by 20% again and make it available for that price, I could wholeheartedly recommend it. I do think it's well worth that. So let's start by taking a look at the decoration. I have to say the colour matching does seem spot on. I've been studying the photos, at least of the preserved example, and the shade of red and cream does seem to be spot on. It's also a very complex livery. We've got the window frames which have been picked out. We've got the lining between the red of the lower body and the cream of the window area. Very nicely done. The northeastern lettering, all of this is very nicely printed. Even though it is applied onto this kind of rough panelling, it still looks really good. The crests, yeah, not the greatest up close, and this is a bit of a thing with Heljan. Noticeably not quite as detailed as the real thing, but from a distance it does look okay. Up on the top, would we call this a clerestory roof? It is kind of that style. We've got decoration on the glazing. Look at that, that's really, really lovely to see. And the thing about this model is that the painting hasn't been overdone, so it's not so thickly applied that it ruins the moulding, which is great because the moulding is very high quality. All of these little grills, the panelling, the riveting on the roof, it all looks really, really excellent, so I'm glad that that hasn't been lost because of too much paint. Let's talk about detail then. So we do have a fair bit of underframe detail, as you can see. Nothing too over the top here, but what is here has been nicely applied and presented well. Then we've got the bogies. This is the powered bogie, which has the spoked wheels. And all of this looks great. Yeah, the moulding on the axle boxes and the springs and such, that is all totally fine. And then we've got the non-powered bogie, which also has pickups on it. And as you can see, this is a different design. Likewise though, the moulding on the bogies is fantastic. And we do have a different wheel design here as well, which is a kind of disc design with the white lining around it. And I do like the wheels on this thing. In terms of the body around the doors, we've got the separately fitted handrails here, which are all nice and straight. That's good to see, and I'm glad that those were separately fitted. And of course, all of the windows on the model are glazed, and basically every wall of this thing does have a glazed window on it, and they are all done excellently, which is good to see. The lamps are nice and fine because they don't have to work, so they've not been compromised in any way, which is good to see. Yeah, pretty pleasant lamps here, glued in though, so you can't remove them, which is a pity. Might have been quite nice to see these included as accessories that you can interchange, but still, I suppose that is what it is. And then up on the roof, we've got tons and tons of detail. We've got the vents, which are all straightly fitted. Heljan done a really good job on this time. We've got this raised section in the middle here. I don't know, is that for sort of exhaust purposes or something? Maybe some sort of air intake, I don't know. And then we've got these radiators across the top. I'm going to go ahead and say that's what they are. I don't know for certain, so if you know better, please do let me know. But yeah, separately fitted, very nicely moulded. And of course, they give the whole thing a very unique look, which I like a lot. So yeah, beautifully detailed on the outside, but I think really the interior is by far the best aspect of this. So the passenger compartment, first of all, is really nicely done. We've got the planking on the floor, which is great. The seats have quite a bit of detail on them. They look like they've been upholstered. Now, it's all done with the moulding, but it looks great. And then the sort of rims of the seats have also been painted as well. That can't have come cheap because there's a lot of seats inside here. The doorways and such, these are all separately painted as well, and they look great. But the best aspect of this is the little onboard power station, which is fully detailed. Look at this thing. So we've got the engine here, which drives the dynamo, and that's what powers the thing. And yeah, we can see it all. I can see the belt driving the dynamo there. You can see the engine. There's like handrails fitted around the outside of it. Really, really amazing. This made me think, you know what, this model is great. I'm glad I managed to pick one of these up. Yeah, that is super impressive. And then we've got cab controls at either end as well. Quite a few of these are separately fitted and separately painted as well. I think honestly, this is probably the best detailed Heljan model that I've ever seen. If you'd covered up the Heljan branding and presented this to me and said, you know, what brand is this? The quality and the level of detail would have thrown me off entirely. I would never have guessed that this was Heljan. But it is, and it is absolutely superb. So yeah, very well built, a little bit simple in areas, yes, but also massively complex in other areas, such as the roof and the interior. So on the whole, for 160 quid, I am very, very impressed and happy with this. But of course, I've not seen this run yet, and I've not delved into the mechanism either. Hopefully, this is not going to let itself down in that area, but we shall see. Let's get started. So there she is down onto the track, looking just amazing. And I've already filmed the initial performance test, so I've had the treat of seeing how this runs around the layout. It looks fantastic, but I'm not going to spoil any more than that. I'll show you that in just a second. After that, I did my disassembly to take a look at the mechanism, and that's what I'm going to tell you about now. So the mechanism's not like the best I've ever seen in my life, but it's actually a lot better than I was expecting. So let's get into this. Unfortunately, I decided not to try and access the motor because it would have involved, I think, taking out the entire interior. But it is a coreless motor, as the instructions say, and according to the diagrams, it does have a flywheel, which is good to see too. The location of the motor is also very prominent on the underframe, which does compromise the accuracy of it slightly. But of course, the motor's got to go somewhere, and so it's a choice between compromising the underframe, as they have done, or compromising the interior. And which one would be most noticeable? Well, the interior, I think. So for me, I think this was the best call. All wheels of the model do have pickups on them, so the non-driven bogie does this through the axles. As you can see, we've got these bearings, effectively, which pick up the power, and then there's a wiper fixed to each side of the bogie, which passes power up to the chassis. The driving wheels pick up power in the same way, so it does mean that the drivers do sit into proper bearings, but these bearings do seem to be just punched out of a plate, so they're quite thin. They're not going to last as long as proper bearings, I don't think, but then again, it's a light loco, so I don't think this will be an issue. I just wouldn't want to see this kind of design on a much heavier loco than this. Now, unfortunately, the serviceability of this really isn't the best. The base keeper plate is just clipped on as usual from Heljan, and the clips are behind the wheels, so you can't really get to those to ease them out of position. Really annoying to remove the base, and of course you do need to do this if you want to access the gear train for any reason, to lubricate it or clean it, anything like that. Also, the bogey's all plastic as well, with a lot of the different parts and such just popped into place rather than glued in, and that means it does have a tendency to kind of fall to pieces when you try to service it, which is not the greatest quality. With the base off, you can see we've got lots of gears inside here. You might think, why on earth is this so gear heavy? Well, of course, it's so that the bogey is low relief. If they used larger gears, then this mechanism would encroach on the interior, which it doesn't currently. So actually, that makes perfect sense. Body removal, again, a little bit of a pain because once again, they've used clips instead of screws, but this time it wasn't too difficult to get those off with some glue spreaders. And as you can see, the chassis lifts out quite easily. So this is a die-cast chassis. There is a lot of metal on this chassis. It's just obviously quite hollow because of the interior, which is why it doesn't weigh that much. They've also chosen to send all the wires up to the circuit board through the power plant on board, which is pretty clever, I think, because it hides the wires in plain sight. It almost looks like they're supposed to be there. On the bottom side of this board, you can see we've got the LEDs, quite sparsely populated with LEDs really, but they are there. We do have interior lighting. Here is the next 18-pin DCC socket, which is on top of the board. Once the body's off, not a problem to chip this at all. And here's a surprise, there is indeed a speaker here. Now, the instructions definitely suggested that there was not. They were giving you tips on where to fit the speaker and how best to do it. So again, from Heljan, instructions that are not that useful. You would read this and go out and buy a speaker, wouldn't you? Only to find that one was pre-fitted when you removed the body. So a little bit annoying. Perhaps the instructions should have been reread before release just to make sure they were still up to date. But obviously it's a pleasant surprise to see a speaker here. And then the back-to-back gauging came in at 14.2 to 14.3 millimeters back-to-back, which I think is pretty good considering each axle has a plastic insulator between both of the wheels. So the fact that they are so accurately gauged is really good to see. So yeah, hopefully you can see what I mean. This is way better than I've seen before from Heljan, I think ever, really. And that does shine through in the performance as well. So with that, let me show you how this ran. Okay, I'm really looking forward to seeing this run, actually. Please keep those fingers crossed that this will be a decent performer. Okay, forwards direction. Let's see if this runs at all. Here we go, turning up on the controller. Oh, yep, it's off. Yep, it works. All right. And yeah, it does seem to be very kind of slow and controlled, actually. Yeah, not a speedy runner, which I just think makes sense for something like this. Let me run past at half power for you, give you a sense of the gearing. Let's see, forwards, 50. There you go, that's half power. And has it got a bit of speed to it if it wants to? Yeah, that's full power. So it does seem to be, yeah, I would say the range of speeds is pretty sensible, actually. Now, is there any torque to the mechanism? Obviously, I will run this in before casting any final judgments, but straight out of the box, is there any torque here? Yep. Thought there might be. Coreless motors are pretty decent for torque, and this one seems to be as well. Of course, not a massively heavy machine, this. I keep wanting to say loco, but I know people will jump on me. Shall I just say loco, just for the sake of simplicity? Railcar, autocar, I don't know. Whatever it is, yeah, it does seem to have good torque, and I suspect it's going to be totally fine hauling a single coach. In fact, I'm 99% sure it would be. I'll check the tractive effort in just a second. I can also see we've got nice and effective interior lighting with some good brightness to it, and I think what I'll do now is just dim the lights so that you can see that in action. Okay, ready? I'll do the torque test again just to hold it still. Oh yeah, full power. It lights up like a Christmas tree. Now, some people won't like that. I can tell you straight away. Some people will say, oh, the lighting needs to be far more subtle than that. It's too bright. Personally, for me, no, I don't think so. My layout is well lit. If a model's going to all the trouble of having working interior lighting, you need to be able to see it for my money. And so the fact that this is perhaps a little bit brighter than you might see in real life, possibly, I think it's bang on, because I could notice it even when the lights were on. And speaking of lights on, let me put the house lights back on and I'll show you the crawl. Okay, so I will do the crawl test again after I've run it in, but straight out of the box, what is this like? Let's see. I'm turning it up very slowly. Oh yeah. Alright, so it's going remarkably slowly. I would say maybe not, well actually, yeah. Maybe not entirely smoothly. Okay, fair enough. It does seem to sort of almost stall and then carry on. And has it stalled now? Turn it up a bit. Yeah, so maybe not the most consistent at the moment. I think that's fairly typical for a loco that's not been run in yet. So we'll see how that changes after running in. But yeah, I think compared with some of the other Heljan locos I've tried, particularly considering their out-of-the-box performance, I think this is pretty well up there. Yeah, absolutely fine. And of course, anything above a crawl is beautifully smooth. I mean, look at that. That's quite slow, really. You can imagine it trundling into a station like that. Ooh, it's lovely, and it's going over the points there without stopping. Let's try the rear bogie. Yep, so all the pickups seem to be working. Gosh, it's really, really pleasing. I love it. Absolutely love it. Okay, so let's run it in. Around the layout we go. Hopefully it will be okay on all the curves. Here we go. So this is a light loco, and cordless motors are very efficient, so I'm going to make a prediction that this will not slow down dramatically around the curves. And sure enough, almost no slowing down whatsoever. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this thing is perfectly functional. The lights are great, nice and noticeable. It's smooth, it's quiet enough, doesn't slow down on the curves, doesn't stutter on the points. I can't fault it at the moment. I think with some running in, the crawl will be exemplary as well. I just love it. It is really firing on all cylinders, if you'll pardon the pun. Yeah, it looks marvellous, it runs well, and because I got it when it was reduced in price, I think it was reasonably good value as well, especially for such an obscure prototype. So I'm feeling the happiest I've felt with a Heljan loco for a very long time. So yeah, what a lovely, lovely piece of kit. I'll be back in a little while then, after this is fully run in, and I'll test the performance again, see how it changes, and also run some other single car units for you. Okay, I'll be back in just a second. Alright folks, well that is running in complete, and I have to say this was completely problem free. Not only is it one of the best quality Heljan locos I've ever seen, I think it's possibly the best running as well. So no issues, as you saw, perfectly reliable on all parts of the layout, which is great. Never had a single issue with it. So the tractive effort comes in at 0.22 newtons, which is only about the same as a Hornby Sentinel 060, so it's not powerful, but then again it's not supposed to be, and that certainly would be adequate for this to haul a single coach. So forget that, that's never going to be a problem. What's the torque like now that it's run in? Still good? Yep, look at that. In fact, it can even crawl with an obstruction there. Look at that. So yeah, it's fantastically powerful. Again, cordless motor, great choice for this. What's the crawl like then? It was really, really good before, but struggling to sustain it a little bit. Well, now it's run in for an hour. Hopefully that will have changed. Let's see. Turning up slowly. Turning up. Oh, that is beautifully smooth. Again, that's the benefit of a cordless motor for you. And yep, it's sustaining it now. Let's do a gradual acceleration. Oh, it's brilliant. See what a slightly better quality mechanism can do here. We've got silent, smooth, and brilliantly slow performance from this. Yeah, nice mechanism this time. And the fact that the fact that none of it's visible from the interior is just astonishing. It's really, really effective. great. So I love this, really do love it. And I'm not going to couple this up to anything because I don't think I really need to, and I've not got anything that's suitable for it anyway, but you could if you wanted to. So let's get this off straight away around the layout, and I'll show you what else I'm going to run alongside it. Here we go. So on the middle line, I'm running, I think, the closest rail vehicle I've got to the Autocar, and that is the Great Western rail motor. Now, this will shock you because it shocked me, but would you believe this rail motor was introduced the same year as the NER Autocar? The same year, 1903. I don't know about you, but this seems way more old-fashioned than the Autocar. Steam-powered as opposed to petrol-electric, I guess you'd call the Autocar. Yeah, that just kind of demonstrates just how ahead of its time the NER Autocar really was. Amazing. But yes, they were indeed introduced in the same year. So there it goes, the rail motor. And then on the inside line, just to kind of show where this idea would eventually lead, I've got the 121 bubble car, which is a much more modern DMU, single car DMU there, just to show how things moved on. Alright, so what a pleasing model this is. And you know what, the fact that this is good really does warm my heart a lot because, like I've been saying, it really is such an obscure prototype. This is realistically the only model of one of these that we're ever likely to see produced ready to run, at least, you know, within this sort of half of the century, I suppose. So the fact that it's been done so well is really, really good to see. That means that if you're really interested in this prototype or you'd particularly like to own one, it is something that I can recommend because it's built well. It seems to be built to last, actually. It's got a decent mechanism, fantastic performance, and a level of detail that I haven't seen for quite a while before, and that's without having sprung buffers and working lamps. Usually they would be big downsides to me, but actually the rest of the model is so impressive that I'm not really thinking about those particularly. So yeah, really, really enjoying this one. It's an odd prototype, so I knew I was going to enjoy it, but the fact that the quality and the detail is here as well just makes this so much more enjoyable. So yeah, I implore Heljan to do more of this in the future. You know, treating a model like this, pulling out all the stops, really does make a difference. And I can tell you, it makes it feel a lot less painful spending 160 to 200 pounds on something like this. And honestly, I would do it again. I really would. And that can't be bad for business, can it? So there you have it, a very unusual, very cute looking rail car, which has been very nicely done. Let's have some ratings then for Heljan's NER Autocar, and I have to say today has been a massive surprise for me. This thing has been miles better in every category than what I've come to expect from Heljan in the past, so very impressed and well done to Heljan for this one. So the level of detail I've given 4-star, not quite a 5 on this, but very close. It is really massively detailed. Great livery and decoration on this one, it's been done really nicely. Lots of separately fitted parts as well, including all of the roof furniture and the different handrails on the underframe. Very nice and complex. Obviously the interior is absolutely insane as well, particularly where that power station is concerned. An amazing amount of interior detail, possibly the most I've ever seen on a rail vehicle like this. On the downside though, it's got lamps that don't work. In this day and age, that is a pity because a lot of other models at this kind of price do tend to have that feature these days. Also, unsprung plastic buffers, that seems a little bit cheap for a model that is otherwise so incredibly impressive. So it can't get 5-star for that reason, but overall, yeah, the level of detail is great. Performance, I am not going to fault. Yeah, for a Heljan model, this is very impressive, but it's well deserved. It crawls excellently, it crawled well out of the box, it's now even better after a run-in. Perfectly smooth, consistent around the curves, no cutting out, no issues whatsoever, not even any wobbling. So 5-star, no way to fault it. Now, pulling power is not that important for this kind of prototype because most of the time it's going to run by itself. We do know that in real life, occasionally these would couple up to maybe one coach, but that would be it. So the fact that this has a tractive effort of 0.22 newtons, or about 16 coaches on straight and level track, means that this is way more than adequate. If this was supposed to haul trains and such, I would say this is not powerful enough, because it's actually only the same as a Hornby Sentinel 060, which is not a lot, but for one coach maximum, this is more than powerful enough, so no way to fault the pulling power here. Mechanism then, I've given 4-star. Yeah, generally this is way better, again, than I've come to expect from Heljan. All-wheel pickup, that is fairly typical, but it's got technically proper bearings on the axles, perhaps not as good a quality as some you might see, but they are technically there. It's got a really good quality motor as well, with a flywheel. Seems to perform better than I've seen other Heljan motors perform, actually. And it's got a nice modern DCC socket, which is easy to access once the body's off, and it's even got a pre-fitted speaker, contrary to what the instructions suggested. On the downside though, it's still that issue of serviceability. Particularly getting the base keeper off is a real nightmare, and I was a bit scared of actually damaging this thing when I did that. It's not something that I'll want to do again in a hurry. Few screws, easier base to remove would have been a lot better, I think, but really this is the only issue. Same with body removal, although that was a lot easier to do without potentially causing damage. So yeah, not a huge problem. So yeah, very close to a 5 on mechanism, but not quite perfect, so I've given it 4. Quality then is really close to a 5. Very, very impressed with the quality of this model. Fair amount of metal on board, doesn't weigh that much because it's mostly hollow for that realistic interior, but it is built very well. All of the separate details that I saw fitted were perfectly straight with no visible glue, no blemishes in the decoration, no over painting, no issues with the moulding. I mean, again, this is a Heljan model, folks. Miles better than I've seen before, so 4.5 star. I've knocked it down a little bit for the plasticky bogie construction, where a lot of the different parts are just kind of popped together, which does seem a little bit cheap and nasty compared with some of the like die-cast bogies, which are super robust. Yeah, these aren't quite as good, so I can't in good conscience give it a 5, but it's close enough so that I can give it 4.5. Okay, value for money then is a little bit tricky. I think the full price of £199.95 is a bit pricey for this, and that is the current price. I think the quality is obviously very good, but for 200 quid, I would expect the sprung buffers and the better mechanism construction and the working lamps, that kind of thing. However, at 20% off, which is what Rails reduced these to for a time, I would say that's a lot more like it. In fact, at that price, I don't have such a complaint, because the lack of working lamps and the lack of sprung buffers, etc. is very much reflected in the cost at that price. So I've given it 3.5 star. Yeah, a bit expensive at the full price. When Rails do reduce this though, it's more reasonable, so hopefully they'll do that again. Overall then, that is 8.51 out of 10, a really, really good score, and a grade of B, which is well deserved. So into the logbook we go, and it is in the top 10. Yeah, just above the Bachmann 009 Hunslet and below the Walthers NW2. Yeah, really, really impressed with this. I think the best Heljan loco I've ever seen, very much so. And actually far from the most expensive. That ES1 from last year, I think that's when I reviewed it, was 220 quid at the full price. Yeah, well, this wipes the floor with that. So massive improvement, really, really impressed. So there you have it then, folks. That was my full review of the Northeastern Autocar, produced by Heljan exclusively for Rails of Sheffield. Yeah, pleasantly surprised doesn't really cut it. I've thoroughly enjoyed this one today. And please do let me know what you think about this. Comment down below. Do you think I'm right to praise this? Do you think I've been too generous? Please do let me know. Also, if you've got one of these, what do you think about it? What were your thoughts when you first got it out and tried it and whatnot? Yeah, I'd be really interested to know what you think. But for now, thank you so much for watching. If you are interested in picking one of these up while they're still available, I will include affiliate links down in the description. But for now, I'll say thank you very much once again for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Alright, cheers folks, you take care.